American Time Capsule happened because my mother was playing pool at a fancy pool room / bar, and she met Tommy Smothers in this pool room. And she came home. I mean, I was young, I was living at home, and I had just graduated from USC Film School. And she said, "I met Tommy Smothers tonight, and he wants to see your films." And I said, "Mother, come on." I mean, this was the hottest show on television already. And my mother has a tendency to exaggerate sometimes. And she said, "No, he really wants to meet you. He wants to see your films." And I said, "Okay." She said, "Yeah, you have to call him." So she forced me into literally calling him, and sort of shocked me that I got through on the telephone. He said, "Yeah, sure, come on down and let's talk." So I went down to CBS, and he said, "Well, you know, what do you do?" And we sort of talked, and the election was coming up. And he said, "I don't have much time. I only have about a 3-minute slot." This was about a month before the 1968 presidential election. He said, "Well, if you want to do something about history," or we sort of talked it out, and it was very vague in his mind, and he totally forgot about it. I went back and gathered up a couple of friends, and we started collecting pictures, decided to do the history of the United States, and it had to be 3 minutes because that was the time slot. And I went back to Tommy 3 weeks later, having done this film basically on speculation. He had totally forgotten about it. The show had been put together, was locked, and they were about ready to send it off. And he looked at the film, and I think he was somewhat stunned, just as I was at that point in time. And he took out one of the acts from the show. He had a singing act that had already been taped and everything. And he put American Time Capsule into the show, which aired the Sunday night before the 1968 Nixon-Humphrey election. The way it should have been done would have been on a vertical Oxbury animation stand, but I didn't have the money or the time to set that up. So what we did basically was, one of the two guys that worked with me on this film, we had a 16 millimeter camera which we set up on a stand, and we pointed horizontally, and we set the pictures up on a stand, and we exposed 2 or 3 or 4 frames. I had taken the soundtrack to Sandy Nelson's Beat That Drum, and I had read the soundtrack on an optical printer, and I knew how many frames it was between each beat of the drums, and there's 1,300 cuts in the 3-minute film. And then I made an exposure sheet, so I knew it was 5 frames to here and 3 frames to here, and the whole last minute of the film is 2-frame cuts, so it would be 12 different pictures in a second. And it wasn't done the way it was supposed to have been done, but it worked out all right. It's funny, there's certain milestones in your life that you remember. And for me, when I gave the film, the 3-minute American Time Capsule, to Tom, and they transferred it to tape, and I sat in the audience, it was before they were taping one week's show, and the entire cast was there, and the crew was there, and everything stopped because basically they were rolling this film into the show. And everybody was sort of stunned for a moment. And then the crew and everybody just sort of turned around, and they looked at me, and I was standing in the back with Tom, and they started applauding. I knew right then that something very special was happening. I really had no idea up to that point. And in fact, it launched my film career. It made me become known for something. Now, it wasn't what I had started out in film school to be known for, and it was something that I wanted to eventually get away from. But what a launch, what a jump to have your 3-minute film on the hottest network show on television.